one big difference between the Epic Film Challenge, as practiced by Mr. Forkerball and Mr. Razor Wire, and the Decades of Action Challenge being set in motion by myself, is that there's a big difference between the most important action movie of any given year and the best one. This will make itself much more apparent in a few months' time when I get around to the 90s and start talking about a pair of Michael Bay movies. This morning, the AV Club website posted the latest in Tom Breihan's History of Violence essay series, in which he wrote about Bad Boys from 1995, Michael Bay's first movie, and he teased at the end of the article that his next essay would be on what he considers the most important action movie in 1996, which of course turned out to be another Michael Bay movie called The Rock, a movie which I have severely disliked ever since I first saw it over 20 years ago now. Not really looking forward to watching that one again, but that's the challenge right here. That's what I set out to do. The whole best versus more important thing seems to be bared out again by Breihan himself in his pick for 1974, which is Death Wish, directed by Michael Winner and starring Charles Bronson. The two of them also teamed up for a movie a few years earlier called The Mechanic, which was remade by Jason Statham, or remade by Simon West, the Con Air director, and starring Statham, of course. Or is it Statham? I like Statham, but you know, whatever. I just don't know for sure what the correct pronunciation is. So Death Wish basically started a whole series. There were, I think, 4 sequels. Not really sure. But it's based on a novel, which the author himself really publicly dismissed the movie, thought it was pretty terrible. It's not surprising at all. I actually wrote a Letterboxd review on Letterboxd for this the day that I saw it. But I mistakenly said that I hadn't seen any other Charles Bronson movies in their entirety. That wasn't true, actually. There's a few big ones that I've missed out on, such as The Great Escape and The Dirty Dozen. But I have, however, a long time ago, back in the 90s, watched his Sergio Leone film. He played the main character in Once Upon a Time in the West, with Henry Fonda as the villain. And I'm not a fan of Charles Bronson on the whole. Like I said, I've only seen the 2 movies of his, but based on Death Wish, maybe this is just a really bad example. And Breihan himself feels that Charles Bronson was probably not the best guy to take this part, even though he works well in the role from the point of view of someone who goes around killing people without being too bothered by it. He seems terrifically unbothered by walking around shooting guys, basically walking around the streets of New York at night, inviting muggers to accost him so that he can gun them down. The backstory on this character is he grew up with a very pro firearms father, but a pacifist mother, and so his father taught him how to use handguns and rifles, but then when he died, his mother said no more of that and insisted that he become a pacifist, and he became a landscape architect. Working in New York, he got married. His wife is played by Hope Lange, so the movie begins with them on vacation in Hawaii, and everything is wonderful, and they get back to New York, and very, very shortly, Hope Lange and their daughter are jumped. They're the victims of a home invasion by 3 really, really sort of crazy guys. I mean, they're just like wildly psychotic and just like, intent on mischief and destruction and harming people, getting off and harming people. One of whom, of course, is played by Jeff Goldblum, his very first movie. He doesn't really have a name. He is just this out of control wacko who beats Charles Bronson's wife, and he and the other guys, they rape the daughter, and the wife dies, and the daughter's left catatonic. And there's some issues involving exactly how Bronson and his son-in-law are going to deal with that problem of the daughter throughout the rest of the movie, but it's sort of forgotten by the end. She basically doesn't ever seem to recover, and if there's a scene of her recovering, it was cut. The focus becomes the character, Charles Bronson's character, his name is Paul Kersey, deciding to take the law into his own hands and just invite people to confront him physically at night outside New York so that he can gun them down. Yeah, and he really doesn't, his expression doesn't change a whole lot. He, it's like I said, he's not the right guy to go through like a transformation, I guess. This is something that Breihan pointed out in his article. I don't have a lot of context for this, unfortunately. When we get into the movies of like the 80s, the 90s, the ones after that, I'll have a little bit more cultural context. But I'm going a lot by what Breihan's written in his essay on this movie. And that Bronson was, already well established as an action hero, in much the same way that Harrison Ford was established as an action hero before he was in The Fugitive, and was basically playing a doctor, a non-action hero type, who was then forced into, running and trying to escape, from people and what have you. Bronson, on the other hand, is playing basically a guy who doesn't deal with violence on a regular basis, but then, makes the transition to violent behavior very easily, and without too much internal struggle, it seems like. I don't think this is a very good performance from him. So what else is there to say about this? Not a lot. Vincent Gardenia, actually, is the cop. The other only real important character in the movie is the cop that's leading the investigation, because the whole vigilante thing, the press gets a wind of it, it becomes nationwide news, and there's all this sort of public debate. There's a scene at a party where two people are arguing, and one of them is like, the vigilante's killing a lot more black muggers than he is white muggers, and another person's like, well, what are we supposed to do, increase the number of white muggers on the streets so that we could have an even racial kill ratio or something like that? And it reminds me a hell of a lot of conversations that I see people having now, at least on social media, not necessarily in person. Anyway, Vincent Gardenia plays the cop, and I know him, basically. A lot of the other actors I didn't recognize in the film, but I know him from Little Shop of Horrors. He was Mr. Mushnick, the owner of the flower shop that Seymour and Audrey worked at, where all the trouble began. And I liked him because he cottons to the fact that Paul Kersey, this guy played by Charles Bronson, is the one that they're looking for, the vigilante, and so whenever he speaks with them, he sort of bites his name off very specifically. Mr. Kersey. Mr. Kersey addresses him. Doesn't like him at all. But yeah, they sort of worm their way out of arresting him just because it seems like the street crime level has dropped dramatically since this vigilante became big news. And yet every time Paul Kersey goes out with his gun in his pocket, he manages to come across somebody who wants to, pull a knife on him and get his money so that he can shoot him. Very, very fortunate that he happens to always run into someone who's willing to mess him up so that he can kill him. Not a lot of action set pieces in this movie. I mean, there's shootings, but these are very, very brief scenes. There isn't a whole lot going on in them. They basically unfold the same way. Kersey's walking around, some guy comes up to him, threatens him, pulls a knife, pulls some weapon, boom, he shoots him, that's pretty much it, and then he runs off. Though that's the extent of action in this movie. So I'd say it barely qualifies as an action movie. But apparently it was very, very influential. Not only did it start its own series, but inspired a lot of other movies kind of like it. Whole series of knockoffs, and that is why Breihan picked it for most important action movie of that year. Certainly not the best. In fact, he cites another Charles Bronson movie called Mr. Majestic, which came out the same year, as a much better movie and a better Charles Bronson vehicle than this one. So yeah. probably the movie that I've watched so far in the series that I like the least. This is 1974, so about 3 weeks from now I'll be on to 1977. At that point I'll sort of do an overview of the previous 10 years. A special video looking back at the first 10 episodes of this series and just what I've liked the most and what I've liked the least, and maybe cite a few set pieces, a few action set pieces that I really enjoy. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this movie. Like I said, 1974, I wasn't really culturally aware. I had turned 1 year old in 1974. So like I said, don't have a lot of cultural context for movies of this period. I'm going a lot by what I've read, basically, about them, and just my own reaction. I don't really read a lot about each one of these movies, especially the ones that I haven't seen already. Next week is going to be the blaxploitation film Dolomite for 1975, so I'll be taking a look at that one. But again, not really reading anything about it in advance, including the Breihan essay, just watching it, having a reaction to it, and then talking about it here, which is what this series is. I hope you enjoy these videos. I got a link to my Facebook page below, as well as, of course, Tom Breihan's article on Death Wish, if you'd like to read that for yourself. He has a lot more information than I do. And he also mentions that Denzel Washington had his first appearance in a film in this movie as well, except he has no lines at all, and I completely missed him, actually. Also, Olympia Dukakis is in this movie. I spotted her name in the credits, but I have no idea who she played. I missed her completely. So yeah, that's my little video on Death Wish. Next week's Dolomite. Though I correctly guessed The Rock for 1996. I'm not really all that certain about what 1997's pick is going to be. I'll find out about that in 2 weeks when the article on The Rock is posted. In any case, that's all for now. Thank you again for watching. Excuse me, my throat's been dry lately. And I will see you again real soon. Take it easy.